Racist cop kicks black woman out of Billionaire's event, not knowing she owns the venue. Aaliyah Carter's charity gala in Beverly Hills was meant to be a celebration, not a confrontation. But one officer's prejudice would change everything. Yet as the evening unfolded, a single police officer's gaze settled on her with dismissive suspicion. Unbeknownst to him and much of the glittering crowd, Aaliyah wasn't just another attendee. She owned the very venue hosting the event. Before the night ended, his brazen act of racial bias would trigger a storm of repercussions few saw coming. Aaliyah Carter sat in her Tesla, scrolling through last-minute updates for the gala. The city lights blurred past as she prepared for the night ahead. Aaliyah built the Beaumont estate into a top venue, using its success to support education programs. Tonight, the Beaumont estate was hosting a major fundraising gala, with invites extended to the city's wealthiest donors, philanthropic icons, and up-and-coming entrepreneurs. Many believed the host was simply the Beaumont Foundation, never realizing the smiling, resourceful Aaliyah Carter was the sole proprietor. She'd intended to keep it that way, letting the event shine on its own merits, not on her personal brand. As the Tesla pulled into the gated driveway, Aaliyah's nerves hummed with excitement. Tall cypress trees lined the entrance, and flickering lanterns guided a procession of black limousines and vintage cars. Paparazzi huddled by the front gate, anticipating glimpses of Hollywood stars rumored to attend. Aaliyah smiled. She recognized how the place exuded sophistication. The grand facade, sweeping terraces, and ornamental gardens, the perfect backdrop for forging million-dollar alliances. Exiting the car, she was greeted by her assistant, Jasmine, petite, sharp-eyed, and juggling a clipboard. "We're almost set," Jasmine reported, breathless. "Auction items are in place, the kitchen staff is plating hors d'oeuvres, and the string quartet arrived early. Only, there's a new policeman at the checkpoint who's being quite a stickler with IDs. He's giving some staff a hard time. Should I ask security to handle it?" Aaliyah frowned slightly. "Let's see if it's just caution. I'd rather avoid friction. But keep me informed if it escalates." Jasmine nodded, leading Aaliyah along the marble walkway. Inside, the foyer brimmed with opulent floral arrangements. Chatter mingled with the soft music overhead. High-profile guests admired the shimmering chandeliers, the curated modern art on the walls, and the polished wood floors. Despite her hidden position as the estate's owner, Aaliyah welcomed a handful of them personally, ensuring each felt valued. She introduced herself as the gala's executive coordinator, a role that allowed her to blend in among the event staff. She preferred it that way. In the corner, she noticed a well-known actor deep in conversation with a tech mogul. Across the lounge, a real estate magnate, someone with ties to Morgan Stanley, clinked champagne glasses with a famed humanitarian. The synergy was undeniable. These gatherings weren't just about glamour. They were platforms where deals, donations, and social statements converged. Amid the flurry, Aaliyah's gaze drifted to the open double doors leading to the estate's grand terrace. At the edge of the crowd, she caught sight of a uniformed policeman. He appeared stiff, aloof, scanning the attendees with a discerning eye. She recognized him from earlier mentions, someone new, assigned to assist with perimeter safety. He hadn't approached her yet, but the subtle tension in his posture hinted at an unsaid wariness. Shaking off a fleeting unease, Aaliyah pressed on, greeting more donors, orchestrating final touches. She had no inkling that within hours, her carefully cultivated anonymity would collide with that officer's misguided assumptions. For now, the estate glowed with promise, the air fragrant with the possibility of forging philanthropic breakthroughs. She was content to remain incognito, letting the event's success speak for itself, unaware that fate was about to upend her best-laid plans. While the gala thrummed with conversation and laughter inside, Officer Brandon Radcliffe stood near the estate's entrance, fiddling with his uniform's radio. Recently transferred from a less affluent district, he'd volunteered for off-duty security gigs in posh neighborhoods, lured by the extra pay. Tonight, that meant standing watch at the Beaumont estate, some refurbished mansion hosting a billionaire's event. Radcliffe had only half listened during briefing. He was unimpressed with the grandeur. In his mind, these wealthy gatherings were shallow displays of excess. He recalled the briefing that a foundation was behind the event. Hence, he presumed the actual owners were absent, or at least stashed away. Rich folks rarely show face at their own parties, he thought cynically, scanning the well-dressed crowd for trouble. He paused a moment to recheck the security pass of a young Latino waiter hustling in with extra trays. "Why's your pass half crumpled? You sure you belong here?" Radcliffe barked. The waiter stammered, Sorry, sir, it got bent in my pocket. I was just out fetching more supplies." After a tense moment, Radcliffe let him pass, but not without a glare. He relished the small show of power. These events attract all kinds of opportunists, he mused. Minutes later, a staff member approached to suggest he loosen the ID checks, as some guests felt harassed. Radcliffe dismissed them. "I have the authority to ensure everything's legitimate. If they have real invites, they'll be fine." He eyed passers-by suspiciously, scanning for anyone who didn't fit his mental image of a wealthy guest. He'd just finished verifying an older man's invitation when he noticed a figure across the foyer, a tall black woman in a stunning silver gown. Something about her commanded the room's attention as other guests paused to greet her. Yet she also seemed intimately involved in coordinating staff, offering instructions with a calm authority. A suspicion flickered in Radcliffe's mind. Is she really staff or a guest? She's wearing that dress like she belongs. But do I trust it? He brushed off a colleague's attempt to chat, hyper-focusing on the woman. The uniform pinned to his chest felt like a license to question, especially in a domain he considered suspiciously over the top. Soon his chance arrived. He saw her slip out to the courtyard for a moment, presumably to check on outdoor arrangements. Seizing the opportunity, Radcliffe followed, weaving through clusters of unsuspecting guests. In the courtyard, the soft glow of string lights reflected on polished marble floors. The woman was conferring with a floral arranger, adjusting centerpieces near a shimmering fountain. Radcliffe cleared his throat. Radcliffe approached Aaliyah. "Ma'am, ID, please." Aaliyah frowned. "I'm coordinating the event." "You need credentials," he insisted, "otherwise you'll have to leave." The directness startled her. "I coordinate the entire facility, so yes, I have access. But is there a problem with me being here?" He stiffened, voice cooling. "I need to see identification. This is a high-profile event. We can't have random individuals interfering." He emphasized random individuals with an undertone that stung. Her lips parted, surprise mingling with indignation. She tried to keep an even tone. "I'm sorry, do you suspect me of something? I'm wearing a formal gown, checking on logistics. How does that suggest wrongdoing?" Radcliffe gave a dismissive shrug. "I don't know. Could be a con, or someone who slipped in to hustle donors. You want to prove otherwise? Show me some official staff ID or a manager who can vouch for you." At that moment, a passing staffer recognized the woman, starting to speak. But Radcliffe held up a hand. "Let her answer for herself," he barked. The staffer blanched, stepping aside. Aaliyah felt a swirl of frustration. She could quell this with a single statement, "I own this place." But her instincts told her to remain calm. She weighed the optics of revealing her ownership in front of a dismissive officer. "Shouldn't have to prove my existence in my own venue," she thought. "I'm indeed authorized," she managed, "and we appreciate your vigilance, but you're overstepping. If you're uncertain, talk to the head coordinator, Jasmine. She'll confirm everything." Radcliffe's eyes narrowed. "Let's not complicate. Just show me ID or you'll have to leave. People are uneasy about suspicious staff around valuables. This place houses expensive art, right?" Her heart hammered, anger flaring. He'd singled her out purely on the basis of appearance. "I'm not required to—" she began, but he interrupted. "You are if I say so, ma'am," he snapped. "I'm the law here. Now either produce credentials or step out." He motioned toward a side exit leading to the street, Ignoring the mounting tension from onlookers, a hush settled. The floral arranger stood frozen, unwilling to intervene. The staffer from earlier hovered uncertainly, eyes darting. In the distance, guests continued their revelry, unaware that the estate's true proprietor was facing a humiliating demand. Feeling her composure fracturing, Aaliyah inhaled deeply. Something in her also recognized a twisted opportunity. If he insisted on throwing her out, the revelation that she owns the entire venue might be more dramatic. But the heartbreak of being forcibly removed, even temporarily, in front of staff, was galling. "Fine," she said tightly. "If you believe I'm not authorized, do what you must. But I guarantee you'll regret it." Radcliffe misread her quiet fury as defiance. "Right, let's not cause a scene," he said, ironically fueling one. "Come with me." He gestured for her to walk. She stiffened, hoping for a staff member or friend to intervene, but everyone seemed too shocked or anxious about confronting a policeman. Summoning dignity, she turned on her heel, heading toward the side exit. Her heart pounded with rage, sorrow, and faint anticipation. When the truth emerges, she thought, this man's entire stance will crumble. But for the moment, the racism and ignorance fueling his actions overshadowed sense. She followed him out into the night, the courtyard's glow receding behind them. The humiliating scene played out with a small knot of staffers trailing, unsure if they should protest or observe. The entire fiasco was about to escalate, and soon the entire estate would learn of it, unleashing consequences no one, especially Radcliffe, had foreseen. Officer Radcliffe marched Aaliyah through a narrow side corridor, away from the main reception area. He glanced at the nearby staff following them. "Everyone else, step back," he commanded, voice echoing off the marble walls. The staff obeyed, albeit reluctantly. Only one, Jasmine, trailed behind, frowning, wanting to help but uncertain how to proceed. The corridor opened onto a secondary exit, seldom used by guests, mostly reserved for deliveries. Radcliffe halted, propping the door open. A chilly evening breeze swept in. "All right," he said, "unless you can show me official papers or ID that confirm your involvement, you're out, now." Aaliyah's chest constricted. She couldn't recall a time she'd felt so devalued. She locked eyes with Jasmine, who looked crestfallen. "Officer, this is Mrs. Carter. She's the lead organizer," Jasmine ventured. "I can vouch for her. Let me get the event's primary logs from—" Radcliffe cut her off. "Is she on payroll? Let me see the pay stubs or contracts. Otherwise, I have no reason to trust your word." The hostility in his tone soared. Jasmine shot Aaliyah a pleading glance. "Should we reveal the bigger truth?" Aaliyah hesitated. Part of her wanted to hush this policeman with the single line, "I own this entire property." But the swirl of emotions, anger, heartbreak, a desire to see how far he'd push, made her pause. A voice in her mind whispered, "He'll never learn unless he's forced to see the consequences." She turned to him, voice trembling but resolved. "So you insist on throwing me out?" "Correct," Radcliffe stated, unwavering. "I have cause to suspect you. If you can't provide documents, I must ensure you're no threat. The event is for invited guests and verified staff only." Aaliyah's lips pressed into a thin line. She exhaled slowly. "Then do it. But you'll face repercussions." He gave a derisive chuckle. "Spare me the threats. People love dropping lawsuits, but this is protocol." With that, he gestured at her to step outside. The staff looked on, horrified. Aaliyah swallowed, stepping over the threshold into the cool night. The heavy door slammed behind her, shutting her out of her own estate. She stood in the darkness, stunned. "I've just been kicked out of my own property." The humiliation stung bitterly, but also ignited a fierce determination. She pulled her phone from her clutch, hands shaking. She had to contact someone who could rectify this madness. Maybe the event's big-name sponsor, who was known to the public. But would that overshadow the deeper lesson? Maybe let him bury himself further, she thought. The second part of her plan formed. Inside, Jasmine hurried around, trying to alert key individuals. Meanwhile, Radcliffe returned to the reception area, scanning for more violators. He radioed a quick update. Situation handled. One suspicious female ejected. He felt a smug sense of accomplishment. In truth, he was slightly rattled by her confidence, but he told himself it was just bravado. She's probably some social climber who tried to score freebies. As the gala proceeded, guests mingled, unaware that the estate's real owner was forcibly cast out. Some staff tried to discreetly mention the fiasco to attendees, but the crowd was large and the event's pace frantic. It might have gone unnoticed for hours, if not for one crucial development. A high-profile philanthropist recognized Aaliyah's absence. 30 minutes later, in the main lounge, an internationally renowned singer, Adriana Keys, arrived looking for Aaliyah. She was set to deliver a special performance in honor of the foundation's cause. The schedule indicated Aaliyah would do a short introduction, but no sign of her host. Adriana turned to a staffer. "Where's Mrs. Carter? We should finalize the set list." The staffer, pale-faced, informed her of the humiliating scene. Adriana's jaw dropped. "He what? Are you serious?" She stormed off to find the policeman. Word of the bizarre incident spread among an inner circle of VIPs who found the story equal parts appalling and baffling. Some recalled seeing Aaliyah bustle about with an air of authority. Could she truly be the estate's owner? Outside, Aaliyah paced near the side gate, calling longtime friend and attorney Kevin Mills. She recapped the fiasco. Kevin, incensed, offered immediate legal recourse. "This is your property, Aaliyah." "Let me handle it. We can have him removed or arrested for trespassing." Aaliyah's heartbeat hammered. The thought was tempting, but she wanted to ensure the fallout taught a lesson, both to the officer and the watchers. "Kevin, stand by," she said quietly. "I want to see if he'll double down. I might re-enter through the main entrance with a few key people, then reveal the truth publicly. That might have the bigger impact." Kevin agreed. The plan was risky, but given the humiliating nature of the ejection, a public unmasking might leave the policeman with no excuses. He can't claim ignorance once he sees the official documents or the press coverage, she reasoned. While the night soared on under gilded chandeliers and wealthy donors toasted million-dollar pledges, a roiling drama brewed. The policeman's arrogance festered inside, fueling his sense of dominion. Aaliyah, trembling with a mix of fury and strategic calm, prepared for the ultimate confrontation, one that would soon dismantle his illusions about who truly belonged. Then it happened. An hour into the event, Adriana Keys took the stage for her performance, but first she grabbed the microphone. In her mellow contralto, she announced, "Before I sing, I want to say this place belongs to an incredible woman, Aaliyah Carter, who, unbelievably, was kicked out by a misguided officer. We cannot stand for such injustice." The crowd froze. Most had no idea what she meant. A murmur spread, heads swiveling in confusion. Aaliyah's phone buzzed. "Come back inside." She walked in, the crowd parting as whispers spread. All eyes were on her. Meanwhile, outside, Aaliyah strode towards the main entrance, accompanied by her attorney friend Kevin and a few supportive staffers. The walkway was lit by ornate sconces, the reflection of moonlight dancing on the estate's facade. She inhaled deeply, pushing aside the sting of humiliation. Focus on the bigger cause, exposing racism, ensuring this never happens again. As she neared the door, a pair of uniformed security guards parted, bowing in recognition. They understood who truly paid their salaries. The once imposing threshold felt strangely heavier tonight, as if it tested her resolve to reclaim her rightful place. Inside, a hush fell as a ripple of awareness spread. She's back. People turned, quietly forming a parted path that led toward the stage. Adriana Keys, still at the microphone, locked eyes with Aaliyah, offering an encouraging nod. In that moment, the event's splendor receded into the background, all attention riveted on the woman re-entering. Radcliffe spotted her. For a second, shock flickered across his face. His earlier satisfaction faltered, replaced by apprehension. "Where do you think you're going?" he barked, stepping forward. A hush so deep one could hear the hum of the overhead chandeliers overcame the crowd. Aaliyah paused, her posture regal. Kevin Mills, carrying a neat folder, joined her side. "Officer, I'd like you to meet Ms. Aaliyah Carter," Kevin said, voice projecting across the silent hall. "She is the sole owner of this property." Low gasps rippled among guests. Some stared wide-eyed at the policeman, recalling how he had marched a woman out not long ago. Others stood in stunned realization. She's not just an employee. She's the entire reason this estate exists. Radcliffe looked unconvinced, a flush creeping up his neck. No, that can't be right. If she owned the place, she'd have said so. An older gentleman, a real estate executive who recognized Aaliyah from prior deals, stepped forward. "Officer, I can confirm Ms. Carter purchased the Beaumont estate a few years back. She's been quite discreet about it, but yes, she's the boss here." Kevin handed the policeman a copy of the deed, replete with Aaliyah Carter's name, official stamps, and property details. Another staffer projected a digital version on a nearby screen for clarity. Murmurs multiplied as the truth sank in. The policeman stared at the documents, flustered. He cleared his throat, fishing for a retort. If she had shown me ID," he sputtered. Aaliyah's expression was calm but resolute. "You never gave me a chance. You demanded I leave, ignoring staff who tried to confirm my role. You judged me unworthy to be in my own property." A few subdued claps broke out, possibly from staff or sympathetic guests. Radcliffe's face burned red. He stammered, "I was just doing my job, ensuring no unauthorized person was messing around. She didn't have a visible staff badge." Kevin stepped in, voice ringing with authority. "Her name is on every official document for this event. You refused to check the logs or talk to the lead coordinator. Instead, you forcibly ejected the legal owner of the venue. That's not how police protocol should operate." By now, phone cameras from guests flickered, capturing every second. Some posted live updates to social media. The entire fiasco was broadcast in real time, a policeman doubling down after humiliating the rightful owner. A sense of righteous indignation swept the room, fueling an undercurrent of condemnation. Radcliffe, cornered, looked to the uniformed security staff for backup, but they simply shrugged, acknowledging Aaliyah as their employer. A cold sweat formed on his brow. He tried to salvage dignity. "Ma'am, I apologize if there was a misunderstanding, but we have strict instructions to keep suspicious persons out." Her eyes flashed with suppressed fury. "You singled me out because I'm a black woman giving directions to staff. You refused to accept the multiple signals that I was in charge. If you truly believed in verifying, you'd have checked logs or asked your superiors. Instead, you forced me outside without a second thought." Adriana Keyes, microphone still in hand, faced the policeman. "I cancelled my performance for tonight. The real show is you, officer, exposing the prejudice you so casually display. This woman built this place from the ground up to do good in the community, and you tried to erase her from it." A hush followed, broken only by the rustle of designer gowns and suits. The policeman realized that any further protest would bury him deeper. He glanced around, seeking an exit route. People parted, letting him see the door. He cleared his throat. I'll just step away." Kevin's crisp voice. "Before you do, Missy. Carter, do you want him removed by your security?" The policeman's eyes darted, panic lacing them. Aaliyah studied Radcliffe. She read the fear, the crumbling arrogance. For a heartbeat, she considered having him physically escorted out, symbolizing retribution. But her moral compass steered her differently. In a measured tone, she said, "You can leave on your own, officer. But rest assured, I will be filing a formal complaint, and I'll make sure your department addresses your actions." Radcliffe, shoulders slumped, muttered something inaudible, then strode to the exit. The crowd parted in tense silence. Phones filmed him as he departed, his once cocky bearing replaced by the slow steps of a man undone by his prejudice. Once he vanished into the night, the tension eased. Aaliyah turned to the guests. Emotions warred in her chest. Sadness for the ugly display, relief at reclaiming her rightful place, anger that it happened at all. She spoke quietly, addressing them. I never wanted to overshadow my foundation's cause with my identity, but I see now it's crucial that I stand up for myself, especially when prejudice rears its head. I own the Beaumont estate, and I built it to champion philanthropic work. I'll continue that mission, no matter what ignorance I face. A wave of applause followed, building into a standing ovation. Some guests had tears in their eyes, others approached to apologize, to declare solidarity, or to express admiration for her grace under fire. Aaliyah's heart pounded with conflicting relief and heartbreak. Yes, the policeman left, but I wish it didn't have to come to this, she thought. Through the swirl of cheering, Jasmine slid next to her, whispering, The event can still continue if you wish. The donors are standing by you. Everyone is in your corner. Aaliyah exhaled slowly. Then let's refocus. Let's not let him ruin this night. We have causes to support. She saw the staff's proud smiles, realized how deeply they believed in her leadership, and so the night took a dramatic pivot. Freed from the policeman's intimidation, guests pressed forward with the auctions, the donations, the connections. Yet the story of Aaliyah's humiliating eviction and her triumphant revelation hung in the air. By dawn, it would spread across local tabloids and social media like wildfire, fueling discussions about the subtle and not-so-subtle racism that could surface in even the most opulent settings. Aaliyah, weary but resolute, navigated the rest of the event with grace, ready to address the blowback that would surely follow. Sunlight crept into the cityscape as the gala concluded in the early hours. Aaliyah returned to her personal suite on the estate, kicked off her heels, and sank onto a chaise lounge. She felt drained, physically, emotionally. The swirl of applause after she re-entered the venue had been reassuring, but the sting of being ousted in the first place lingered. For a moment, she replayed the policeman's sneer in her mind, her stomach tightening. Exhaustion claimed her, and she dozed fitfully, haunted by images of guests gawking, the policeman blocking her path. At dawn, her phone buzzed incessantly with messages from staff, friends, even a few journalists. When she finally awoke mid-morning, she scrolled through texts and headlines. Black woman kicked out of her own venue, officer leaves in disgrace. Beaumont estate shock, owner humiliated by on-duty cops' bias. An evening of high drama in Beverly Hills, racism exposed at elite gala. Social media exploded with viral clips capturing Radcliffe's confrontation. On Twitter, hashtags, the Beaumont estate and stand with Aaliyah trended. Countless netizens condemned the policeman's blatant prejudice. Some retweeted the videos of her re-entry to a standing ovation, calling it a real-life Cinderella twist. Others pointed out that not everyone had the privilege or platform to correct such an injustice so publicly. Jasmine arrived with coffee, looking exhausted but triumphant. You're all over the news, Miss Carter. People are furious at that cop and praising you for handling it so calmly. Aaliyah sipped the coffee, her gaze distant. Calm wasn't exactly how I felt, she murmured. She then scrolled messages from philanthropic leaders expressing shock and solidarity. Her phone rang constantly, but she let it go to voicemail, unsure how to address the sudden wave of attention. Meanwhile, the policeman's department released a short statement claiming they were reviewing the incident. Radcliffe had apparently made no official comment. A friend texted that he was placed on temporary leave pending investigation. Aaliyah read this with a swirl of relief. There was some accountability, at least. The next day, a local journalist from the Los Angeles Times requested an in-depth interview. At first, Aaliyah hesitated. She disliked turning personal strife into public spectacle, but after seeing Anna Thompson, a known community activist, post a supportive video praising her, she decided to accept. Maybe this was an opportunity to highlight racial profiling on a bigger scale, beyond her personal story. In the interview, she described the moment of ejection, how the policeman refused staff confirmations, how her identity as the estate's owner was ignored. She emphasized that for many black people, this wasn't an isolated tale of mistaken identity. If I, with all my resources, can be demeaned so easily, imagine what others face daily with no recourse, she said. The article's publication sparked an even louder public outcry, fueling calls for departmental reforms. Some of Beverly Hills's elite circles felt uncomfortable. A few old guard figures privately muttered that Aaliyah should have identified herself from the start, saving them from embarrassment. Others recognized their own complicity in perpetuating a culture that allowed such biases to thrive unchallenged. A wave of younger philanthropists, however, rallied around Aaliyah, praising her humility and using the incident to push for more inclusive outreach in the city. Even bigger names weighed in. A segment on a popular morning talk show featured the story, with the hosts condemning the policeman's actions. Michelle Obama, one real name that quickly took an interest, tweeted her support. No one should be treated like a stranger in their own home or business. Proud of Aaliyah Carter for shedding light on a bigger problem. The mention of a national figure catapulted the discussion further, intensifying the pressure on local officials. Tucked amid the swirl of public reaction, Aaliyah's personal circle of friends and family provided emotional grounding. Her best friend from childhood, Kendra, flew in from Chicago to check on her. "Girl, you always told me you'd do something big, but this is next level," Kendra teased gently, hugging her. They spent an evening with wine and heartfelt conversation, reminding Aaliyah that beneath the storms of headlines, she remained just a determined woman who believed in fairness. Meanwhile, staff at the Beaumont estate saw a curious surge in event requests. Ironically, the venue's newfound notoriety had event planners drooling over the estate where the owner ousted a racist cop. Aaliyah resolved to channel that attention into philanthropic expansions, forging deeper ties with Anna's activism network. If nothing else, she'd leverage her platform to support policy changes like better training, independent oversight, and disciplinary measures for biased policing. Within a week, Officer Radcliffe's superiors reached out to request a private meeting with Aaliyah, hoping for a quiet resolution. She refused. "We can have a meeting only if we include community advocates and set a plan for departmental accountability," she insisted. Her stance further endeared her to the public, but irritated traditional power brokers used to behind-closed-door settlements. For Aaliyah, it was a balancing act. She wanted genuine reform, not a hollow apology or hush-money settlement. Many observers called her the new face of philanthropic activism, a role she never sought but now wore with cautious pride. If forcing the police department's hand was the cost of preventing future humiliations, she was all in. The swirl of press inquiries, social media fervor, and political jockeying became her new reality. She navigated it with dignity, not letting bitterness consume her. Beneath it all, she recognized that the officer's ignorant assumption had triggered a wave of changes. Perhaps her humiliation was a catalyst for a city, maybe a nation, to reevaluate how easily prejudice can overshadow truth. Even in shimmering enclaves of wealth, racism lurked, ready to strike. Now the entire community had to confront it, and that, in Aaliyah's eyes, was the silver lining. 2 weeks after the incident, the uproar continued to grip Los Angeles. News cycles normally moved quickly, but the combination of a high-profile location, a wealthy black woman's humiliation, and a policeman's ignorance kept the story alive. Calls poured in from civic groups, media organizations, and even legislative bodies wanting Aaliyah's perspective. She accepted some interviews, politely declining others to avoid burnout. In that period, Anna Thompson, the community activist, proposed a joint effort, a public town hall on policing and prejudice, hosted right at the Beaumont estate. Aaliyah hesitated at first, worried it might devolve into a spectacle, but Anna convinced her, We need dialogues in spaces that historically excluded minority voices. Let them see we belong." Inspired, Aaliyah agreed. Planning began. They invited local officials, police representatives, civil rights leaders, and concerned citizens. The concept was radical, a heartfelt forum tackling racism, set in a place that symbolized wealth and privilege. Anna believed the stark juxtaposition would underscore how deeply prejudice could cut, regardless of affluence. Word spread quickly. The Beaumont Town Hall on Equality would be open to the public, with limited seats. An online RSVP system oversaw the distribution of free tickets. People from across socio-economic backgrounds registered, from liberal activists to conservative local business owners. Despite initial skepticism, police brass signaled willingness to attend. Even the city's mayor commended Aaliyah's initiative. At the same time, Officer Radcliffe's disciplinary hearing loomed. The department indicated they were considering suspension or termination, citing prior complaints now uncovered. Some law and order advocates cried foul, painting him as a scapegoat. But new testimonies from earlier events suggested a pattern of microaggressions and power abuse. Aaliyah, well aware of these revelations, felt validated. He was no mere unlucky figure singled out by chance. On the morning of the town hall, the Beaumont estate buzzed with a different energy. Instead of a lavish gala, volunteers set up rows of chairs in the main ballroom, a large banner reading "Dialogue for Change." Anna choreographed the lineup of speakers, ensuring a balance of voices. Security detail was carefully managed to avoid intimidation, mostly plainclothes or estate staff, minimal uniformed officers. A sense of cautious hope permeated the premises. By noon, the space filled. Aaliyah glanced around, amazed at the variety. Community organizers in simple clothes sat alongside millionaires in tailored suits. Journalists with notepads, college students with protest signs, mothers from East LA seeking reassurance that their kids wouldn't face discrimination. The stage, cleared of its usual decor, boasted only a few microphones and a modest set of seats. When Anna introduced Aaliyah, a hush fell. Aaliyah approached the mic, heart pounding, but wearing a calm expression. "Welcome to the Beaumont estate," she began. "I acquired this property to foster philanthropic endeavors, yet, ironically, it became the site of my own experience with racial bias. Rather than bury that pain, we're here to confront it and find solutions so no one else faces such indignity." Applause erupted, some rising to their feet. A few individuals wiped away tears, sensing the earnestness in her voice. Next, Anna guided a panel discussion featuring a senior police official, a civil liberties attorney, and a local mother whose teen son faced over-policing. The conversation turned raw, exploring the psychology of bias and the burdens of living in fear. People asked pointed questions, panelists offered policy suggestions, emotions rose but remained largely respectful. At one point, the police official, Captain Desmond Harris, acknowledged the tragedy of Officer Radcliffe's actions. "We must do better," he admitted, "training officers to see beyond stereotypes, to treat each person with dignity. I believe we can implement reforms that Mrs. Carter and Ms. Thompson have championed, bridging police with communities." Some in the crowd remained skeptical, but a few gave subdued nods, hopeful that sincerity underpinned his words. Aaliyah took the mic again. "I want to be clear. This isn't about punishing one officer alone. It's about dismantling a culture that enables such incidents. I invite the department to embrace transparency, better screening, and community oversight." She paused, scanning the faces. "We all share responsibility, lawmaking, activism, philanthropy. Let's not wait for another fiasco to do what's right." The crowd roared with approval. Anna then presented a petition with thousands of signatures calling for immediate steps. An independent complaint system, mandatory bias training, and accountability measures if officers racially profile. Captain Harris, though reserved, promised to relay the demands to the commissioner. By the end of the town hall, a sense of unity emerged. People lingered, exchanging contact info, discussing next steps. Some long-standing adversaries found common ground in empathy. A reporter approached Aaliyah for a quick statement. She said softly, "I always wanted the Beaumont estate to be a beacon of generosity. Today it hosted a beacon of truth as well. That, to me, is real progress." As the event ended, Aaliyah stood tall, knowing the conversation had just begun. Her phone buzzed. A message from a detective within the same precinct, praising the town hall and offering to champion reforms from inside. A glimmer of positivity. Steps were small, but they moved forward. Thus, in the days that followed, local talk shows discussed the town hall's success, community groups formed new alliances, and the Beaumont estate stood as a testament to how one act of prejudice could spur a wave of collective introspection. For Aaliyah, though the memory of being kicked out still hurt, she found solace that her personal story ignited something bigger, the possibility that tomorrow's officer might think twice before letting bias dictate their actions. While the city continued grappling with the reforms demanded at the town hall, an unexpected figure reached out to Aaliyah. Lieutenant Gabriel Morales, a respected veteran within the local police department. He requested a private meeting, claiming he possessed insights that could aid her fight for accountability. Intrigued but cautious, Aaliyah agreed to see him at the Beaumont estate's private office. On a brisk afternoon, Lieutenant Morales arrived in plain clothes, stepping into the estate's quiet library. The room's shelves of art books and philanthropic awards glinted in soft lamplight. Aaliyah, clad in a simple navy dress, greeted him with polite reserve. Anna Thompson joined them as a silent witness, arms folded in measured skepticism. "I appreciate you meeting me," Morales began, voice calm. "I've served 25 years in the force, seen both its honorable side and its failures. The Radcliffe fiasco shames us all, but I think you should see this." He handed over a slim folder. Curious, Aaliyah opened it. Inside, she found copies of internal complaints about Officer Radcliffe, reports from citizens, minor references to conflicts with other officers. Some were dismissed for lack of evidence, others settled quietly. Anna's brow knitted. "There's a pattern here, but it never escalated to discipline." Morales sighed. "Systemic inertia. He targeted individuals who lacked resources or were intimidated, so their complaints fizzled. But your incident brought everything to light." He met Aaliyah's gaze. "I can't defend the department's negligence, but I want to help fix it. If you add these documents to your formal complaint, you can push for deeper structural changes." Aaliyah paused, flipping through the pages. The patterns were glaring. Radcliffe systematically singled out minorities in affluent zones. Anna tapped her foot, a slow anger burning. "We suspected as much, but this is proof, and you're risking your career sharing it?" Morales nodded. "Yes, my superiors probably disapprove, but I can't watch the city I love be tarnished by a few bad actors. The system needs to step out of the shadow of denial." Gratitude mingled with caution. Aaliyah said softly, "Thank you, Lieutenant. This helps. We aim not to tear the entire force down, but to ensure accountability for those who betray the badge." He gave a weary smile as though burdened by decades of internal politics. They spent the next hour discussing departmental culture, resistance to outside oversight, and possible routes for reform. Anna took notes, planning to incorporate these revelations into ongoing activism. Morales promised to testify, if necessary, about the department's repeated ignoring of red flags. By the meeting's end, a fragile alliance had formed. An insider wanting change, an activist demanding it, and a venue owner turned reluctant public figure bridging them. Before departing, Morales asked Aaliyah one last question. "May I see the spot where it all happened, where he kicked you out?" Aaliyah hesitated, then led him to the side corridor. She recounted the moment he slammed the door behind her, the humiliation searing her memory. Morales listened in grim silence. He placed a gentle hand on the doorknob, exhaling. "I can't undo what you felt here," he said. But I can help ensure no officer repeats it. I promise to fight from within for your reforms. I owe you that." Aaliyah's eyes misted. "We appreciate it. Let's make sure it's not just talk." Anna nodded in agreement. Morales left, leaving the corridor strangely silent. The memory lingered, but a sense of closure peeped through. Not all within the force were complicit. Some believed in forging a fairer path. That evening Anna urged Aaliyah to act swiftly. "The Union is still resisting, but with Morales's testimony we have a shot at real policy shifts. Let's schedule a public hearing with the city's police commission, present the documents, the inside knowledge." Aaliyah swallowed. "Yes, let's do it." Days later, the local police commission announced a special session to address alleged systemic issues sparked by the Radcliffe matter. Media outlets teased a possible watershed moment in Beverly Hills policing. A buzz surrounded the upcoming hearing. Would it lead to new departmental regulations or fizzle under political pressure? Aaliyah braced for the heightened spotlight. She confided in Jasmine, "I never aimed to be the face of a movement, but here we are. If we must stand in the fire to reform the system, we will." Jasmine offered unwavering support, reminding her that the Beaumont Estate's philanthropic mission now entwined with social justice in ways they never anticipated. Amid these developments, event bookings at the estate soared. Some ironically saw it as the place that exposed prejudice, a symbol of progressive values. Aaliyah found the irony bittersweet. Her personal ordeal was fueling business, money that she funneled toward Anna's non-profit alliances. "We'll transform negativity into empowerment," she told Anna, who wholeheartedly agreed. Meanwhile, Officer Radcliffe, suspended and awaiting a final departmental ruling, remained out of the public eye. Rumor had it he was preparing a statement claiming the meltdown was miscommunication, possibly hinting at a countersuit. But public sentiment was largely against him. The media carried stories from people who recognized him as the same officer who harassed them in expensive neighborhoods. As the next hearing drew near, Aaliyah steeled herself. She'd stand before a commission that historically rubber-stamped complaints away, armed with internal files from Morales, Anna's data, and her own heartbreaking story. The city braced for the confrontation. Would they truly carve out reforms, or bury the scandal with half measures? In the interim, the Beaumont estate buzzed with philanthropic events, each overshadowed by the legacy of the fiasco. Attendees whispered about the transformations afoot. Aaliyah walked those halls each night, recalling the humiliating corridor, yet comforted by the knowledge that every step forward was one more stride away from the policeman's ignorance, and one step closer to a more equitable future. A month after the fiasco, a crisp morning dawned for the special police commission hearing. Hordes of onlookers packed the chambers, a stark municipal room with high ceilings and worn wooden benches. Journalists jostled for vantage points. Security was tighter than usual, ironically featuring uniformed cops who recognized Anna and Aaliyah from headlines. A wave of hush fell when Aaliyah, Anna, and Lieutenant Morales entered. On the dais, 5 commissioners, somber faces reflecting varied stances, presided. The session opened with formalities. Then a commission liaison read out loud the purpose: to address allegations of racial bias, specifically in the case involving Miss Tars, Aaliyah Carter, and to examine broader systemic issues brought to light. The first segment allowed Anna to present data on discriminatory stops. She highlighted how wealthy neighborhoods often saw these, targeting staff or visitors of color. The commissioners seemed engaged, some nodding gravely. Next, Aaliyah recounted her experience again, calm but impassioned. She emphasized not just the personal humiliation, but how easily an officer dismissed staff confirmations and her own word. "It was prejudice in action," she stated, voice resonating. "If someone with my resources was powerless, imagine the plight of those with less." As she finished, respectful applause broke from the audience, which included civil rights groups. The commissioners allowed it, though typically they demanded quiet. The moment felt charged. Then came the turn of departmental representatives, led by a deputy chief who tried to distance the force from Radcliffe's actions. "He was off duty, hired privately," the deputy chief said. "We condemn any misconduct, but this can't define the entire police force." Lieutenant Morales rose, seat scraping the floor. He unveiled the internal complaint files, explaining in measured tones how repeated issues with Radcliffe were glossed over. Gasps rippled among commissioners. The deputy chief's expression soured. Commissioner Lewis, a middle-aged woman with a stern countenance, leaned forward. "Lieutenant, are you implying a pattern of ignoring formal complaints, or an intentional cover-up?" Morales inhaled. "I can't prove a direct cover-up, but the system's inertia protected him. Complaints from people of color were dismissed or not escalated. The message was, this problem isn't big enough to shake the status quo." Ms. Carter's case tore that veneer away. A hush settled again, tension so thick one could taste it. The deputy chief tried to deflect, blaming resource constraints and bureaucratic oversights. Anna pounced, citing exact times complaints were filed. One commissioner rubbed his temples, realizing the scope of negligence. Another commissioner, a long-time reform advocate, seemed outraged, urging immediate steps. At last, the commission invited public commentary. A line of speakers formed, staff from the Beaumont estate who witnessed the ejection, local residents sharing run-ins with Radcliffe, business owners recounting how potential donors or partners of color were often hassled near wealthy enclaves. The stories stacked, forming a damning mosaic of how easily prejudice pervaded policing. The hearing stretched into late afternoon. The commissioners conferred, stepped back for a short recess, then reconvened to deliver initial statements. While formal rulings might take time, their immediate stance spoke volumes. Chairperson Martinez, wearing glasses perched low on his nose, spoke for the group. "We are deeply disturbed by the evidence presented. Effective immediately, we instruct the department to proceed with an internal disciplinary board for Officer Radcliffe, with external oversight. We'll also commission a broad review of departmental complaint handling. Ms. Carter, Anna Thompson, and Lieutenant Morales have our gratitude for bringing this to light." A hush, then applause thundered from the audience. News cameras captured Anna hugging Aaliyah, tears of relief shining in their eyes. Though the official changes were in early stages, the Commission's stance signaled that ignoring or burying such issues was no longer feasible. It was, for many, the strongest sign of progress in living memory. Emerging outside, the bright daylight felt symbolic. Reporters swarmed, microphones thrusted forward. Aaliyah was asked, "Do you trust the Commission to follow through?" She steadied herself, replying, "We'll remain vigilant. Reforms only work if continuously enforced, but this is a start." Anna echoed her sentiments, urging the public to hold leaders accountable. Lieutenant Morales quietly shook Aaliyah's hand, whispering, "Thank you for letting me do my part. I truly want a better department." She nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude that at least some in the force aligned with fairness. In the days following, the Commission's announcement rocked local political circles. The mayor publicly welcomed the reforms, while certain union members lambasted them as knee-jerk capitulations. A flood of supportive messages reached Aaliyah, including from philanthropic partners who pledged resources to Anna's next wave of campaigns. The story of a policeman humiliating a venue owner had grown into a citywide transformation, bridging activism, policy, and community determination. A few weeks later, the Beaumont estate hosted a modest reception celebrating the initial commission milestone. Invitees spanned from community activists to mid-level officers wanting to champion change. The atmosphere was hopeful, the conversation centered on forging stronger ties. Aaliyah circulated in a simple pastel dress, reflective of how far the narrative had evolved from the glitzy gala that began it all. Yet she remained realistic. The policeman's final disciplinary hearing was still upcoming, and implementing new complaint systems took time. Some corners of the department remained resistant. She also braced for potential retaliation or sabotage by radical union elements. But Anna and Morales stood with her, along with an ever-growing coalition of voices. In quieter moments, she reflected on the irony that a humiliating confrontation on her own doorstep had propelled her into this role. She resolved not to squander it. The estate's next philanthropic expansions would incorporate police-community bridging programs, fostering mutual trust. Her personal heartbreak had birthed a mission, ensuring no one, black, brown or otherwise, would be dismissed from a place they rightfully inhabited. Thus, as the city moved forward with new policies, as Officer Radcliffe's case hovered in the near future, and as Aaliyah championed fairness in every corner, the Beaumont estate stood tall, no longer just an architectural marvel, but a symbol of improbable unity. Racial bias might not vanish overnight, but in Beverly Hills and beyond, a door had been opened, one that no policeman's ignorance could slam shut again. Months later, the estate's lavish corridors thrummed with an altogether different energy. This time, Aaliyah Carter was hosting a multi-day forum for non-profits, local government agencies, and law enforcement leadership, focusing on best practices for eliminating bias. The event was less about glitz and more about substance, workshops, panel discussions, and networking among activists and policymakers from across the region. It was a testament to the transformation sparked by that single humiliating episode. Attendees strolled the grounds, no longer gaping at the estate's opulence, but marveling at how it now served as a hub for bridging social gaps. Anna Thompson orchestrated many of the sessions, collaborating with Lieutenant Morales, whose inside knowledge offered crucial insights for reform. Meanwhile, Officer Radcliffe's final departmental hearing concluded with an outcome that few contested. He was formally dismissed. The department, hoping to salvage its public image, cited repeated violations of protocol and demonstration of bias. Their statement recognized that the Aaliyah Carter incident had exposed deeper failings. For some in the city, it was a relief. For others, particularly the union's old guard, it was a bitter pill. But with the commission's backing, the verdict stood. Aaliyah felt a strange mix of vindication and sympathy. She took no pleasure in seeing someone lose their livelihood, but recognized it was a necessary step to assert that prejudice had consequences. She decided not to dwell on it further, channeling her energy into forging a new normal, a synergy between philanthropic vision and community activism. One evening, near the close of the multi-day forum, Aaliyah wandered the estate gardens. The moonlight bathed the manicured hedges, and in the distance she heard the gentle hum of conversation from night owl attendees, still debating solutions. She smiled, remembering the swirl of paparazzi that once hovered here, hungry for scandal. Now the estate felt tranquil, purposeful. Edward, her longtime friend and philanthropic partner, some might have expected him to appear as her romantic interest, but in this storyline we keep him as a supportive figure, joined her, offering a glass of sparkling cider. He admired the starry sky overhead. "I'm proud of how you turned that policeman's ignorance into real momentum," he said softly. "I see how these gatherings matter. People leave here inspired, collaborating on reforms." She clasped his arm. "I just hope we keep the impetus alive. We've forced a conversation, but it's easy for societies to slip back into apathy once the headlines fade." He nodded. "True. But you have Anna, Morales, a legion of supporters. The Beaumont estate is a brand now, recognized as a place that confronted bigotry head-on. If we stay persistent, we can nurture lasting change." In the garden's corner, a staffer approached, handing Aaliyah a note from Anna. She recommended scheduling another town hall in 6 months to measure progress, co-hosted by the city. Aaliyah smiled, scribbling an enthusiastic yes in reply. The synergy between her estate's influence and Anna's grassroots approach was unstoppable, bridging the usual divides that stifled real progress. In a reflective mood, Aaliyah took a seat on a stone bench by the fountain. The water shimmered with the reflection of flickering garden lanterns. She recalled that fateful night, the policeman's smug voice, the sting of the door shutting her out. She closed her eyes, letting the memory surface one last time. Anxiety tightened her chest, but she breathed it away, reminding herself, I overcame that. I took that powerless moment and used it to empower others. As if on cue, Anna appeared, dropping beside her on the bench. I can't believe the forum's basically done. It was a smash success. She laughed. Remember how you used to say you'd keep a low profile behind the scenes? Fate had other plans. Aaliyah chuckled wryly. No kidding. If someone told me I'd become a public figure in the fight against racial profiling, I'd have laughed. But I guess we don't pick how our moments choose us. Anna nodded, eyes glistening. That's the power of lived experiences. It's painful, but can be a catalyst. Then, lowering her voice, she added, We've changed the conversation. People in high places are listening. This is your legacy, Aaliyah. A swirl of humility and gratitude washed over her. Our legacy, she corrected gently. Yours, mine, and everyone who believed we could do better. Anna squeezed her hand in agreement, a silent vow to keep forging ahead. In the final day's concluding session, Aaliyah took the podium one last time, addressing the forum's participants. She spoke of the estate's new mission as a house of solidarity, bridging philanthropic glitz and real social progress. She expressed hope that each person would carry the spirit of collaboration back to their corners of the city. Rapturous applause followed. Some attendees gave tearful thanks for the life-changing dialogues they'd experienced. Late that night, as guests drifted away, leaving only the quiet hush of wind in the cypress trees, Aaliyah lingered in the foyer. She touched the spot where the policeman had first confronted her, a faint smile crossing her lips. It no longer felt menacing. Rather, it was a place of liberation, where illusions of who belonged were shattered for good. She locked the doors, turning off the grand chandeliers. The Beaumont estate rested in darkness, yet brimming with the promise of a new day. A day in which ignorance had less room to hide, and a woman's rightful place couldn't be questioned simply because of the color of her skin. In that quiet, she exhaled, letting the final traces of pain slip away. Tomorrow, she'd continue the fight with renewed vigor, her vantage unshakably her own. Aaliyah Carter's journey began as a humiliating confrontation at her own doorstep, an estate she painstakingly built to advance philanthropic causes. Yet that single stinging moment of prejudice revealed a wellspring of transformation for an entire city. Out of injustice came unity, fueling public outcry, shifting official policies, and forging alliances between activists, donors, and even conscientious officers. The Beaumont estate, once a quiet testament to Aaliyah's private ambition, became a nationwide symbol of triumph over bias. If Aaliyah's story resonates with you, her resolve, her strategy, and her decision to turn personal hurt into communal progress, please like this video to show your support. Share it with those striving to dismantle prejudice in their communities or workplaces. And subscribe to our channel for more stories of courage, where everyday moments spark seismic change. Together, let's amplify these voices and ensure no one, anywhere, can be told they don't belong in the spaces they rightfully own.